And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers beat the Penn State Nittany Lions 110-102 in a triple overtime thriller. I think we can call it a thriller. I mean, it wasn't pretty. There was nothing aesthetically pleasing about that game, but it was a remarkable night of basketball at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall as Penn State and Indiana both seem to want to win and then not want to win, and just a remarkable game that Indiana ends up winning. And look, it was ugly. We're going to break all of that down for you on this episode of the Assembly Call. But this team was on the brink, the season truly on the brink heading into this game, and then sitting there at the end of regulation down, at other points in overtimes down, seemingly about to lose and fall over the brink at 4-6 in the conference with a home loss to Penn State, but they found a way to get the win. And as much as we're going to want to nitpick some of the particulars and not be impressed with certain aspects of the game, I'm proud of them because these guys they found a way to grit this one out. And I think, we've come to realize about this team, there aren't going to be a lot of pretty victories. So let's just enjoy the victories when we get them, because there is some beauty in the ugliness. And that's what we saw today in Bloomington from Indiana as the Hoosiers win 110-102. I am your host, Jared Morris. I am here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms, and we will be breaking this game down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. And let's start, as we always do, with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And look, for Indiana tonight, this was another game where Thomas Bryant really came to play. We saw it from him in the Northwestern game, kind of the return of the old Thomas Bryant, and we saw it again tonight with Thomas finishing at the rim, making big play after big play. But what really stood out to me from Thomas is go back to regulation. And I know that seems like a long time ago, but back when it was 69-66 and Indiana's still kind of hanging on, trying to just stay in this game, give itself a chance to win at the end. And Thomas got rebound after rebound. He only had 3 rebounds in the first half, was not having a great night on the boards. But during that stretch, late in regulation, Thomas was a monster on the glass and gave Indiana a chance to win. And that is something that Thomas has been inconsistent with all year. It was huge to see. And then in that first overtime, with Indiana down 78-74, Thomas had an offensive rebound, a dunk, and an and one. That got it to 78-66, which was a huge play at that time. And again, it was powered by Thomas Bryant rebound. And when he's rebounding like he did late in the second half and in overtime, he finished with 11 boards, 4 of them offensive. And when he puts that together with his terrific offense that we saw tonight, he's a fantastic player. And he was tonight. 31 points, 11 boards, 13 of 18 from the field. But those rebounds late were huge just to give Indiana a chance to win, which fortunately they took and were able to pull out the victory. Tonight's banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based brand by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud offer a line of T-shirts and accessories that are unmatched for anyone who wants a unique, stylish way to display their own pride in being a Hoosier. Check them out at HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY to receive a 15% discount on your entire order. That's promo code ASSEMBLY to receive 15% off at HoosierProud.com. All righty, let's make the extra pass, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. We go to Mr. Ryan Phillips for his rant brought to us by thebiglead.com.
To all our friends at Yogi's who might be watching us right now, please have several stiff drinks for me because I desperately need one right now. I am exhausted, and what really bothered me about that game was that I had to do this and I couldn't drink during it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's so many, as you said, there's so many takeaways from this game, a lot of negatives that you could certainly bring up. But as you said, the guys toughed it out. I thought the officiating both ways was horrendous in this game. I just felt like the calls were part of the reason the game lasted so dang long, because there were just obvious calls not being made. And, we can get into that later. I didn't get it. And I think the Big Ten has a lot to explain in this one. As far as the guys, I mean, you look at Thomas Bryant, Robert Johnson, and Josh Newkirk. I thought those three guys carried the team. I thought they actually showed some of the leadership we've been asking for. Josh Newkirk especially. I think that this was his best game as a Hoosier. I mean, I know other guys set their career highs, but that happens when you play 3 overtimes. But I thought Josh Newkirk from the beginning, it was his best game as a Hoosier, and I thought he played. We've seen him playing with a lot of effort in the last couple games, but you look at the end of the first overtime where he went in and took it on himself to make that layup. It was an off balance over the head layup that went in, that barely got off. I mean, geez, I don't know if he got that off. I still don't know. He
got it off. He got it off.
I mean, legally it's off, but I don't know. That was as close as I've ever seen one of those reviews. And of course, you look at Robert Johnson, Devontae Green, and Thomas Bryant, who were all in double figures in rebounding. I mean, how often do you see that? A freshman guard, Devontae Green had a double-double and 10. And he's a point guard perimeter guy, and he had 10 points and 10 rebounds to go along with 4 assists. So I thought it was great. Stuff from him tonight. For the most part, he made some freshman decisions, but we've talked about that before. That's going to happen for a while. But I thought that the way they battled was a positive. Certainly, there's a lot to unpack and a lot we could discuss. But the fact that they were able to fight through and after the first half, it looked like this was going to be about a 15-point win, and they really struggled in the second half offensively. And then in the overtimes, I mean, it just kept drawing out, and every time they get a lead, they give it up, and it just you just kept waiting for the other shoe to drop and Penn State to come back again. But it was a good job by these guys to really tough it out, and I'm exhausted. I can't imagine how they feel.
Yeah, no kidding, with so many guys playing over 40 minutes. All right, let's go over to Andy Bottoms. It looks like we may be having some trouble with the video, but we should have the audio. So, Andy, your bottoms line.
No one's going to complain.
Yeah, why couldn't the video go out on Ryan? Your bottoms line brought to us by bracketology.fm.
I mean, we can certainly lament how poorly played this game was at times and how many times each team tried to give the game away completely. But this was a win that these guys really needed, and they fought hard for. And IU clearly, I mean, we finally found the key to victory. If you can get Robert Johnson, Thomas Bryant, and Josh Newkirk to combine for 85 points in the game, you should feel pretty good about your chances to win. But I mean, I would echo what you said about Bryant. I thought he was just fantastic. Anytime they really seemed to need a basket, he went and got it. Johnson made some boneheaded plays at times, made some really big plays. As you mentioned, only a couple turnovers away from a triple-double, so that was exciting. But also played 50 minutes according to the box score that I'm looking at. So just a great win over not a great team, but sometimes just getting on the right side of one of these can help things out. Obviously the recovery time before Sunday at Wisconsin is going to be difficult with all the minutes the guys logged tonight, but this was a game they had to have. They found a way to do it, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that, despite a lot of things that could certainly be improved upon. But I guess I think about a little bit about the other way. If they didn't come out on the winning end of this, what things would be like. So it's nice to not have to deal with that.
Yeah, and before we move on to the next topic, too, the other moment that I want to go back to, you have a triple overtime game, and it's so easy to forget stuff that happened in the first half and in the second half. But the clubhouse leader for a while for me for the banner moment was the 2 free throws that Deron Davis hit at the end of regulation. Those were absolutely huge, with Indiana down 2 to give Indiana a chance to get to the overtimes and get the win. And for him to be a guy who Indiana could go down to, feel confident getting the ball down to him on the block, he was able to make a move, get to the free throw line. I think Thomas Bryant had missed 1 out of 2 on a couple straight trips to the line. And for Deron Davis to step up and knock down those 2 free throws and just some of what he did in the second half, I think that obviously bodes well for Indiana's future, because he's a key piece for the Hoosiers moving forward. And obviously Indiana struggles defensively when he and Bryant are on the floor together, as we've mentioned, as you guys pointed out to me on our last post-game show. So that's one of the reasons we don't see them out there a ton together. But I thought when he was in there in the second half into the overtimes, he did some nice things, and hitting those 2 free throws for a big man to be able to step up with that kind of pressure was huge, and that was great to see. So as we move forward here on the assembly call, real quick, I want to take a minute and tell you about our other sponsor, SeatGeek. Buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time. It's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or show that you want to go to, and none of those older ticket sites want to change that. But SeatGeek is different. They've come along and created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets. And sometimes you buy a ticket to a game and you get 15 minutes of bonus time, like tonight. SeatGeek is always the first place I go to look for tickets to a game or concert because everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. And if you don't buy a ticket to go see the game live, then sometimes you're like Purdue and Northwestern fans and you don't even get to see the first half of your team's game. That's why you go to the games. SeatGeek does the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. They do the work. You save the time and money. Best of all, our listeners get a $20 rebate off of your first SeatGeek purchase. The way that works is you download the SeatGeek app, go to the settings tab and click add a promo code, and then enter the promo code assembly, ASSEMBLY, and SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code assembly today. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are breaking down Indiana's absurd 110-102 victory over Penn State in Simon Scott Assembly Hall. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And look, we talked about how this was a must-win game. The importance of this win can't really be overstated. And I know I said before the game on Twitter, this would be a big win for Indiana. And some people fired back at me, how sad a state things are in, that, a win over Penn State at home would be considered a big win. And yes, maybe at the end of the season, when we step back and look at, this game in a larger context, we would like to not have so much writing on a home game over Penn State. But this is where we are. And for Indiana to keep its season alive, keep treading water, and just give itself a chance to do something in the second half of the season, they needed this win. And they got it. And they got it without OG Anunoby. They got it without James Blackman Jr. And one way they did that was with Josh Newkirk doing his best James Blackman Jr. impression. 27 points. He was 4 of 8 from downtown, 9 of 14 overall. And what really impressed me about Josh tonight is that early in the game, he was not playing well. He was bad on defense. He had 2 early turnovers. Tom Crean took him out. But from the time that he came back in, he played really, really well. And for a guy, obviously, who has been maligned and has drawn a lot of ire, to make the big shots that he made, including, obviously, the huge shot at the very end there that, couldn't even tell if it was good, but it was good and sent the game to overtime, was just huge to see. Andy, what did you see from Josh tonight?
All right. Sorry. I might need to
get
there
he is.
Hey, everything's working. The exact same thing that you did. I mean, he was horrible to start the game. As you said, both defensively and just taking care of the ball. Took some bad shots, but he really seemed to settle down and come back in the game and get things going. And especially, in I forget which overtime it was. The whole game has kind of run together for me at this point. But there was a stretch there where both he and Johnson really attacked the basket, sensing how tired Penn State was defensively. And he did a really nice job getting to the rim and finishing most of the time. Certainly some of those threes, I think they were, hit the huge one there in that third overtime. And that was, it was pretty clear at that point, Penn State was, much like, in the last game, they're just kind of daring him to shoot. But he, stepped up and made big shots and, played a ton of minutes. As did most of the guys. Played 46 minutes, and if what I'm looking at is correct, he was plus 21, and nobody else was better than plus 8. So again, maybe plus minus not the greatest thing in the world, but I thought he made a lot of positive contributions. Certainly made his share of mistakes, as did everyone, but really gave him some stability in the backcourt, which I think is not a word we would have expected to use a whole lot with him. But I thought he was really pretty steady over the majority of the second half of the game.
Yeah, what did you think about Josh's play, Ryan?
I think over the last couple of weeks I've been mentioning this. I think he's been playing really hard. I don't think he's been having a lot of success, but clearly the effort's been there, and I think it paid off tonight. You just saw a guy who was working really hard. Even when he wasn't playing well in the beginning, I felt like it wasn't, a lack of effort. It was just making dumb plays, and I'll give him credit. I think all he's needed all season is just a little bit of confidence. And we've seen it in stretches where he's gotten that, but he hasn't consistently been there. And tonight he was just going. He was just, he was playing as if he wasn't thinking, and he was just going to the hoop. Or when he had a three, he just took it. And, I'd really like to see someone like Zach McRoberts have that kind of confidence as well, because there were a couple threes wide open that Zach passed up tonight that were unacceptable to pass those up. I mean, quite frankly, I thought he played well in general, but it was the same thing. It's if you're standing there all alone, take your three. I mean, if you miss it, you're on a great offensive rebounding team. Maybe someone will grab a rebound. Passing that shot up for a shot that's not as open is not going to help your team. And I thought that Josh did a really good job of that tonight. He was 9 of 14 from the field. He only missed 5 shots and took 14, 4 of 8 from 3. Those are things we haven't seen from him before this season. I just thought it was confidence. That's all it was. And this wasn't, to be fair, he set his career high in the second half. This wasn't, a guy piling on late in the game with a bunch of free throws in a long game. I mean, he had already established that in the second half. And so, whereas Bryant, I thought he played a great game. I think you guys are right. I'm not sure this was his best game as a Hoosier, despite the fact that he set his career high. Whereas for Newkirk, I think it clearly was. I think this was his best game, and I thought that his defense picked up as well. I think that there was miscommunication on a lot of screens and things like that, and I think that was what caused him to look bad when he did look bad defensively later in the game. I thought early he didn't look great, but I thought that later he really cleaned things up. And I thought along with him, Devontae Green looked really good in a lot of those perimeter situations.
Yeah. I mean, it's just winning a game like this. It allows you to kind of exhale because obviously losing a game like this would have been awful. And the tone of the show,
which is funny because I didn't exhale for the last 25 minutes of that game. So it's kind of nice that I get to do it now.
It is. I mean, you avoid another collapse against Penn State, a horrible loss, all of just the ire and the anger and the frustration that would come with that. And look, there's still all of that because ultimately this was still not a great performance from Indiana. I think the grit was impressive, that the playmaking when you needed plays to be made was impressive. But, when you look at it, Indiana still turns the ball over on 22.8% of their possessions. And it felt like half of those were guys just literally throwing the ball directly out of bounds. I don't know that I've ever seen a team have so many miscommunications where one guy thinks a guy is going to continue a cut or be looking for the ball, and he's not, and they just throw the ball directly out of bounds. I thought, Indiana's defense, Penn State only scored 1.01 points per possession, but there were so many times where you felt like that was more a case of Penn State's offensive ineptitude than Indiana really being sound defensively. Because I thought when Penn State was patient offensively and when they made passes and moved the ball, Indiana was more than willing to defeat themselves and give Penn State either a wide open layup or an open three. So, a lot of the warts that we've seen from Indiana all year long were still there in this game. It was just a game where, Indiana was able to make shots, make plays, get a key rebound here or there, and get the win. Andy, from your perspective, I mean, on the negative side, outside of the obvious stuff that stood out, what was maybe your biggest frustration about this performance from IU?
I thought there were times, Bryant was so dominant in stretches. It seemed like there were key stretches where they failed to get him the ball down the stretch and really could have solidified things. I mean, the other thing that you didn't mention was terrible. I mean, they ended up at almost 70%, but they hit a lot there toward the end to really boost that up. But, they mentioned those ones that Davis hit, but outside of that, they had, 3 they missed. Again, I have no idea which overtime it was, but 3 at the end of one of the overtime periods. I think the second one between, Newkirk missed 1 and then Devontae Green missed 2. That continued to be a problem and just generally facing a press, and in particular Penn State's press. I don't know about anybody else. I got some flashbacks to the one of our probably worst shows of when they were showing highlights of that game a few years ago, and when IU gave the game away. But yeah, I mean, other than the turnovers, I think the free throw shooting and again, kind of getting away from where they really were adamant about getting the ball inside to Bryant and Davis at times. There were also key stretches where they got away from it. So those are the 2 things outside of the obvious ones that I would say.
Ryan, outside of the officiating, which was just atrocious on both sides, what stood out to you in terms of something? I mean, there's tons Indiana has to improve, but the biggest thing as we go from this win to having to go on the road and play a team like Wisconsin, the biggest thing that's got to get better.
Honestly, I thought they should have fed Bryant more, and I think there was clearly a concerted effort to do it. And when they did do it, he went to work and he got fouled or got hammered and didn't get the call, or he scored. And this was old school Thomas Bryant. This was Thomas Bryant from last year who was confident enough and the team shot well enough that people wouldn't double. So I thought that was, when they went away from that for stretches, I thought that the as you said, the turnovers were bad. I don't think they wound up hurting Indiana as much as they probably could have in a lot of cases, but I think that some of them were just so careless, throwing it to a guy who isn't looking, that kind of stuff. Devontae Green had a few where guys threw it to him, and he's a freshman. He needs to be paying attention. He wasn't paying attention, and the ball just sailed out of bounds instead of going to him. I thought Robert Johnson had long stretches where he was making terrible decisions with the basketball. So those are there. Also, I think that defensively, they just weren't recognizing shooters. I mean, they weren't getting out on guys who they know can beat them from there. And the thing is, you've got to have confidence that your big guy can back you up. And if you're going to guard a guy, you'd rather make a guy drive when you've got a big man back there to protect the rim than let him shoot a wide open jumper. I mean, you want to force guys to shoot jumpers, but not when they're good shooters and they're standing by themselves. So you've got to make that decision, and you'd rather have a guy like Banks for Penn State is a great shooter. He was only 2 of 8 tonight, but he also hit 2 really key threes when he was standing all alone in the corner. And so I think that you need to, make the smart decision on recognizing who is there, who's got the ball. And also Zach McRoberts on about 4 or 5 plays was slow to rotate, and they got easy dunks in the paint. So everybody has to be on the same page defensively, and they're still not. And that has to change. And it's communication, and it's, just focus, and they need to be on the same page. And it got better in stretches tonight. It absolutely got better in stretches tonight, and it got better in stretches against Northwestern. But it's got to be a full, 40. Well, in this case, 55-minute effort. And it's got to be the full game effort, and you can't play part-time defense. You got to play it every possession, every night.
And of course, better is relative. I mean, we're at this point in the season. We obviously hyper focus on every game. So when we talk about better, the bar is pretty low for what better is, but that's where we are with this team. And, that thought occurred to me in the second half. I'd like to see how many teams could actually beat Indiana if Indiana weren't so hell-bent on beating itself. And that's probably the most frustrating thing about watching Indiana play is how often Indiana will shoot itself in the foot or just make an unforced error, whether it be a turnover, whether it be, you see all the time on defense, a guy either gets beaten out on the perimeter by a dribbler or, is late to making a rotation, and then it's like a domino. And then the next guy is late, and the next guy's late, and the next guy's late, and all of a sudden it's a wide open layup or it's a wide open three-pointer. And it's those kind of issues that we continue to see over and over again. I want to go back to the first half, too, because I thought the game flow for this game was interesting. Penn State gets out to a 15-14 lead at the under 12-minute timeout, and then Indiana really asserted itself over the next 8 minutes. They outscored Penn State 24-11, built up that 38-26 lead, and then kind of nursed a 12-point lead for about the next 4 minutes. And then Penn State hits that three-pointer right at the end of the first half. It cut it to 9 at halftime. Now, Indiana had played pretty well up to that point. The Hoosiers, scored 1.33 points per possession. They had an offensive rebounding percentage of 57%, which is outrageously good. I mean, that means you're rebounding more than half of your own misses, which is an incredible way to compensate for a high turnover rate. But then really from there, Penn State controlled the game in the second half, and they just kind of slowly chipped away at the lead, eventually took the lead, and they actually won 4 of the 5 4-minute segments in the second half, outside of the one that Indiana won right there between the 8 and the 4-minute timeout in the second half. Other than that, Penn State really controlled this game in the second half, which was somewhat concerning. And then, obviously the overtimes just kind of went back and forth, but you never want to see a team, certainly a team like Penn State that's maybe a borderline top 100 team, be able to come into your home gym and kind of dictate the tempo and dictate the pace and dictate the game in the second half, which we saw. So, again, we're excited and jubilant about the win. It's always great to get a win, and you want to savor that, especially when you look at the schedule coming down the stretch, and it starts to get tougher to see where the wins come from, but plenty of warts and plenty of things for Indiana to improve. Andy, you have a point on the defense.
Yeah, a couple of things I noticed. One was they seem to be better at times. Although as soon as I said this in the first half, they gave up an easy dunk off this. But it seemed to be on the ball screens and the pick and roll situations, which they were just getting murdered by for large chunks of the game. They started to do a better job of the first guy getting the right rotation to be able to help off and get the roll man on that. But then anything after that just completely unraveled, and any subsequent rotations that needed to be made were just gone. So if the other team would move the ball enough, they would always end up with an open shot. So I guess you can take that as a little bit of progress in terms of seeing a little bit more of that awareness. But there were certainly other times when nobody got over it. I think McRoberts was victimized by that once, McSwain another time. And the other thing was the zone in the second half, I thought was effective for a little while as a change of pace. But then, Penn State was scoring almost the exact same way every single time, where they would pass the guy in the short post. And like at some point, Deron Davis can't get sucked up on the back line of the defense and be standing at the free throw line while there's nobody back there. I think Robert Johnson managed to, kind of help off and kind of freelanced and got a turnover on one of them, but then they went right back to it, scored again. So I think those are the things that are frustrating, is like you see some stretches where they can string together good possessions, but then, the opposing team does the same thing 4 times in a row and they're not able to stop it. So you see, little stretches here and there, but certainly, things to build on. But it was, those are at least a couple of things that stood out to me defensively.
All right, well, coming up on this edition of the Assembly Call, we will talk a little bit more about the night for Robert Johnson, because this was one of the more extreme nights for him. Some great and some not so great from Robert Johnson. We'll talk about that coming up. First, I do want to tell you real quick about our fundraising drive, which we started last week and which actually goes through this Friday. Our goal was to raise $2,613 in donations in honor of the number of points that Calvert Chaney scored in his IU career, and we actually did that within the first 24 hours. And in the days since, we've actually exploded past that number. And as of this morning, we had raised a total of $3,767.68 after 2 more donations of $200 each actually came through, along with several others. So let me take this opportunity again to say thank you to everybody who has supported us. This revenue will help take us through the end of this season and into the off season, and we truly couldn't do what we do without your support. If you would still like to donate and support the show, all we've been asking is for folks to contribute what you believe our content is worth. We've had donations as small as $3 and as big as $300, and you can submit a one-time donation or set up a recurring donation to become an ongoing sponsor. To view all the options, go to assemblycall.com/donate. Once again, to see the donation options, go to assemblycall.com/donate. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are discussing Indiana's triple overtime win over Penn State, 110-102 tonight in Simon Scott Assembly Hall. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And speaking of being charitable and generous, let's talk a little bit more about Robert Johnson's night, because Robert, there was certainly some bad for Robert tonight. He had 8 turnovers. I thought his defense was inconsistent at best, as was the defense of a lot of our guys. So, you certainly don't single him out for that. But on the plus side, he also had 27 points and he had 11 rebounds. And really, I thought, I think the second and third overtime, he came out and got a bucket right away. And it's always important to get, a bucket early in an overtime to kind of settle everybody down, just have something good happen. And I thought there were stretches when he really initiated the offense well and was aggressive, going to get buckets when Indiana needed them. What's different now for Robert than what he has faced in his first 2 years and even earlier this year is, he is an elite catch-and-shoot guy. And with Yogi Ferrell on the team last year and all the shooters Indiana had, and this year with defenses really focused on Thomas and on James, he's gotten a lot of those looks. Well, now it's him. He is the guy. He's the guard everybody is game planning against. And he's not getting as many of those clean catch and look opportunities. He's, either got someone right on him, or there's not even enough space to shoot, or he's being denied the ball. And so he is having to play offense in a totally different situation. And I think at times that has caused him to, kind of fade in and out of games a little bit and maybe force some shots when maybe he shouldn't. And I think we saw some of that tonight. But ultimately, I thought he settled himself down late in regulation and into the overtime and really had some huge buckets. Several of those little floaters that he had in the lane were huge baskets for Indiana, and so ultimately, on a night when I thought we saw some of the best of Robert Johnson and some of the worst of Robert Johnson, ultimately I think we end up considering this a triumphant game for Robert as a leader, because he helped lead his team somehow, some way to the victory. Andy, you're the president of the fan club. Your thoughts on a weird night for Rojo?
Well, I see in the post-game press conference that he does at least still have a sense of humor after logging 50 minutes. And somebody asked if the career highs amazed him about the three of them all getting career highs. His response was, I mean, we had enough time to do it. So at least he's got a good sense of humor about it. I mean, and the reality is that if you had told anybody that he'd end up with 27 points and make 1 3-pointer on the night, I think that would have been pretty hard to believe. It speaks to how effective he was at getting in the lane and making some of those floaters, which we've seen from him periodically, but certainly not to the degree that we did tonight. I mean, he was 9 of 12 from 2-point range in the game tonight, and I thought really in the overtimes was more assertive. There were a couple times where he really came to take the ball in big situations. Had that one Euro step or Eurasia step, I think, as Galen put it from Crimson Cast, because it was a couple extra steps in there, but I thought he, at least in those situations, like went and got the ball like we had wanted him to. The flip side of that, though, is the turnovers. Some of them came early in the half court that were just kind of silly, careless things that you wouldn't expect a guy with his amount of career starts and playing time to make. And then late in the game, really struggled against the press, and at times felt like he didn't want the ball as much there. And so definitely a mixed bag. I thought defensively he got better as the game went on, but certainly an uneven performance from that perspective. But I think you did see at least some of the leadership things from him tonight. And quite honestly, with Blackman out, he's being asked to play a role that I'm not sure he ever thought he would at IU. And I think there's probably some growing pains that are associated with that scenario, and he's trying to get used to now having to shoulder a little bit more of the scoring load and be relied upon as more of a scorer, like you said, and not just being the recipient of passes from other guys. So a mixed bag from him for sure, but proud of the way that he kind of persevered through 50 minutes. He's got to be exhausted as well, and I think for anybody to log that many minutes and play and put up the points and the rebounds that we didn't talk about. I mean, he ended up with 11 on the night. So, played really well in that aspect of the game. And so I thought overall the impact was positive, but certainly the turnovers could stand to be reduced a bit.
Yeah, and he had 6 of those rebounds in the overtime. He played all 15 minutes, as did Devontae Green and Josh Newkirk of the overtimes, which is a really impressive number. I mean, Ryan, that's what you're asking of your leader is, to take some hits. You struggle, but you just keep coming. And to Robert's credit, he did that tonight.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought he made some mistakes. I think that's obvious. But when you look at it, he averages 27.1 minutes per game and played 50. So that's almost double. I mean, you're tired. You're going to make mistakes. I think Devontae Green, same thing. He averages 13.1 minutes per game. And what he play? 45. I mean, you're asking a lot, as you said. You're asking a lot of these kids. And these are guys doubling their minutes output minimum per game. And really, I think struggling with it. And I think that in the first overtime, it was clear they were tired. I think they sort of caught their second win at the end of that second overtime. And in the third, I thought they played much better, maybe because they just pushed past that fatigue level. It's weird that as the game went on, they actually got more active in that last overtime. And again, it might have been a confidence thing. You sort of hit a lull, you sit for a little bit, and then you get back in there and you kind of have some more bounce in your step. But yeah, one thing that really bothered me with Robert, and I'm starting to understand why he's not the primary ball handler. He brings the ball up incredibly slowly. He doesn't have that speed element to his game where he brings it up quickly, gets it into the front court, and tries to catch the defense while it's still setting up. He walks the ball up, and he is fine with holding onto the ball and dribbling in place for long periods of time. Josh Newkirk has kind of gotten out of that. Occasionally, if the defense is set, he'll do the same thing. But Robert really has a thing where he gets the inbounds off of a score, off of a bucket, and just walks the ball up. And I think that really hurts Indiana, because Indiana's offense is predicated on getting the other team off balance. And when you bring the ball up quickly, even if they're back and set, you're moving, they've got to react to it, and then your guys move, and everybody is kind of, on the same page. And when he just walks the ball up, it doesn't help anything. And I think that I'm starting to understand why he's never taken over the point guard job this year. And it's just not his role, and it doesn't work when he's doing it. I mean, I think it was sort of like, we wanted to see what Juwan Morgan would be like as a ball handler earlier in the year, and it just didn't work. It didn't fit because the mindset is just not there. And I think that's what you're seeing from Robert, and I think that's why it's a positive that Josh Newkirk has sort of taken the ball and sort of taken ownership of that role. And to a lesser extent, Devontae Green as well. But in general, I thought that Robert, for the most part, after some really shaky minutes in stretches in the second half and in the first half, really stepped up in the overtime. And again, he led. And you could see at the end of the game, he and Thomas Bryant hugged, as in, a really big, that was a really big moment for them to overcome that and win that game.
Yeah, we've had some nice celebrations after Penn State wins this season. The other thing too, we talked after the Northwestern game about how you look back at that Michigan State win and how important the contributions of Zach McRoberts were in that game, just hustling and getting rebounds, just kind of filling the stat sheet little by little. We didn't see that against Michigan. We didn't see that against Northwestern. We saw it against them tonight. Just in the overtime, he was out there for 13 minutes and had an assist, had 3 rebounds, one of them offensive, a steal, a block. Was really there to kind of save some possessions for Indiana and do some of those little things that helped. And he's an energy guy. When you've got guys playing 45, 50 minutes, he's out there continuing to provide energy. And, I want to talk about Coach Crean real quick, because obviously there's plenty to lament, in terms of the big picture, how poor Indiana is defensively, some of the offensive strategy, certainly some of the strategy when it comes to breaking Penn State's apparently magic press, where they have 8 defenders and we have 3 offensive players and we're trying to get the ball in against them. It just doesn't make sense. But I thought tonight, from a lineup perspective, I felt a lot more comfortable with what was happening, especially after the first half. Because in the first half, you got some of those crazy lineups like McRoberts and McSwain in there together, and it was kind of like shuffling guys in and out. But I thought from the second half on, he kind of tightened the rotation. And yes, some of that was out of necessity because Juwan Morgan fouled out, and you already have so many guys hurt. But if you look at the overtime, only 6 guys played in overtime because Juwan didn't get in there, but then Freddie McSwain and Curtis Jones never got off the bench either. McSwain, I recall one offensive rebound that he had. I don't really recall any great things that Curtis Jones did early. But Crean was content to go with those 6 guys and let them play, even a little bit tired. And I think this is a theme that we see, is Indiana seems to do better when Crean kind of shortens that rotation some. And it's like guys get into a little bit more sync with each other and just get into more of a rhythm. Andy, what did you think about the rotations and some of the subs tonight?
Yeah, I was trying to look back at it. I mean, I think that the 7 guys, if you count, the 6 that you mentioned plus Juwan Morgan, I think played the vast majority of the minutes down the stretch of the game. I'm trying to find the last time Curtis Jones actually was in, based on what I looked at. He was in, so basically the last 7.5 minutes roughly of regulation and all of the overtimes, he played just those 7 guys. And one of the overtimes never subbed at all. And I think that was when, and then he subbed going into the third overtime and gave Brian a little bit of a rest because he had been playing roughly forever at that point and logged a ton of minutes. So I thought he did as good a job as possible, managing things. The challenge for him at this point is you really can never have a situation with the current guys that are healthy where both Johnson and Bryant can't, one of those guys has to be on the floor at all times at this stage of the game. And so, I think that really makes it difficult to figure out what else you could do. I thought he tried to play Bryant and Davis together. And I think you saw some of why that is a challenge unless the matchup is just right, because if IU doesn't take advantage of those matchups on the offensive end of the floor, which I thought there were times that they really missed opportunities when a much smaller player was forced to guard one of them, that they didn't get the ball inside to them. If you're not going to take advantage of that, then they're going to be liabilities defensively, even if you're playing zone, as we saw in this game. So I thought he tried to, kind of figure out ways to play those guys and buy minutes with them together, but it wasn't all that effective, I think, in part just because of the struggles they had defensively, which is the same thing we've talked about after these last couple games of, you can say that you want to see that more, but matchup wise, most teams aren't playing 2 big guys like that. So one of them is put in a really difficult position on defense. And so I thought he mixed and matched as best he could. As you said, I thought McRoberts really injected some energy, was flying around again like he was at the beginning of that Michigan State game. It reminded me of that, the way he came in those overtimes and was really flying around and obviously had fresher legs than anybody else on the court at that point. And I thought that did pay some dividends. He played, other than the one screen where he tried to go under or switch it and gave up a wide open 3, I thought defensively he played fairly well down the stretch, made it tough for the guys that he was guarding to score. And overall, I think given the pieces that were there, I thought Creed did a good job. I thought McSwain played with some good effort. I was a little bit surprised you didn't see him more. I thought he's really been playing hard the last few games, but I think Curtis Jones is still a little bit banged up. I don't think he's been playing all that well. So I don't necessarily, it didn't surprise me that he didn't play a lot, but if anybody would have played more, I would have guessed it had been McSwain. But good job to tighten up the rotation. Hopefully we'll make the lineup analysis a little bit easier, despite the fact that there's just that many more minutes to look at it for tonight for me.
Yeah, and actually, I made note in the first half. Again, Penn State came out, had that early lead, and there was a lineup that came in. It was Curtis Jones, McSwain, Deron Davis, Josh Newkirk, and Robert Johnson that played for a stretch in the first half. And I thought Indiana had hit a little low, and I thought those five in particular came in, and they were just really playing hard. Like they were, like Deron and McSwain in particular were just playing really tough down low. McSwain got a big offensive rebound. Deron was banging around. And I thought those guys, that came before Indiana's big run in the first half, which of course ended up being huge because clearly we need to build double-digit leads against Penn State because at some point they're going to come back and we have to have enough built up to hang on. But I thought that lineup really gave Indiana energy. And so I was a little surprised too that we didn't see more McSwain. But again, good things have seemed to happen when Tom Crean shortens the rotation, and he did it again tonight. Ryan, does Juwan Morgan look right to you? Because he still doesn't look right to me, especially defensively.
No, I think you see flashes of it, of who he is, and then I think you see him looking uncomfortable a lot, particularly on the offensive end for me. I mean, defensively, yeah, he doesn't. But I just attributed that to his injury. I didn't really think of it as he just didn't look like where he knew. But I mean, you're seeing him last couple games. You see him take 3-pointers, and it doesn't look good. His feet are flat. The ball isn't rolling off his fingertips like it should. He's sort of just sitting there. You saw some energy tonight, and you saw some bounce in his step, but those moments are fleeting. I'm not really sure he's right. He may just still be recovering from the injury. He may not have been practicing very much, and that could have an impact on it. To where he's just not at the level conditioning wise that he needs to be. But as we saw tonight, sometimes when you put Thomas Bryant and Deron Davis in together, you have to go zone. Because they just cannot guard on the perimeter together. They can't both be asked, when they're in there to guard on the perimeter. And they went zone, and it worked for a really long time. But Penn State in the overtime found the key to it, and that was to put a guy sort of on the baseline and throw it into the high post, make Deron Davis make a decision. And they stayed in it for 3 possessions too long, I think, because Penn State found a way to set up a play that would make the defense have to make a choice. And so it's really tough because with Anunoby out and with McRoberts not a guy that's really going to give you anything offensively, and he needs to certainly step that up. I'm sorry, Zach, if you're standing by yourself and you get a kick out in the offense, take the 3. I don't care if you miss it. I really don't. Take the shot. Because it makes him dangerous, and when he's out there just passing the ball around, it's not going to help. So with Juwan struggling, yeah, you're going to have to rely on guys like that more, and they just have to find their rhythm and find the way find their role in this team, is particularly on offense, because I think Davis and McRoberts give you effort defensively. And they may screw up from time to time, but they give you the effort, and they can at least rebound and scrap and things like that. But offensively, they both have to find out where they are. Davis has to figure out how to guard off the dribble, and he will, but it might take some time. But so both of those guys have holes in their game to fill, and they're going to need to step up because Juwan does not look right. You're absolutely right. He just doesn't look like himself.
And Deron did have 2 steals and 2 blocks to go along with 8 boards and 3 offensive rebounds. I mean, he continues to do good things when he gets in there. And it is a shame that he and Thomas can't play together more, because they are 2 of Indiana's 5 best players, especially now with all the injuries that Indiana has. But it is hard to put them out there together. But it's nice to see Deron, staying with it and staying positive and just working his butt off every time he gets out there. And that's why. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say one positive that you have to take from tonight is the fact that Devontae Green and Deron Davis played a lot of minutes and key minutes. And while Devontae was 3 of 11 from the field, missed 4 3-pointers, a couple of them were bad shots, and a couple, he had a couple turnovers that were pretty boneheaded. But He's a freshman who was handling the ball a lot. That's going to happen. But he played 45 minutes. He started, and he played with that group. And, 10 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, a block. Only had one foul, and he did miss those 2 key free throws, but then he came back in the third overtime and made some big free throws. Deron Davis, of course, we don't even get to the third overtime if he doesn't make those 2 free throws at the end of the second overtime. So, it's those guys both stepping up in big minutes. Curtis Jones, to me, looked like he wasn't fully back yet either. I thought that in some stretches he showed energy defensively. I thought he was off offensively. But, again, freshman who's not used to playing those minutes, he again was sort of out of sorts there. But to see Devontae Green and Deron Davis play the way they did was really encouraging, not just for this season, but also for the future. You can definitely see the potential and see what they can provide, going down the line.
Yeah, I think I got those mixed up. Davis's free throws sent the game into overtime, and then it was Newkirk's drive was in the first overtime that sent it into the second overtime.
Davis's free throws sent it to the third overtime, wasn't it?
No, because IU collapsed at the end of the second overtime.
Oh, you're right.
To the third overtime. It was the end of regulation is when he scored.
Yeah. Okay. There were too many periods of basketball to try and keep track of.
I mean, seriously, it's 55 minutes of basketball, guys. We're only contracted to remember 40, so we're really providing. We should have just gone into the postgame show as soon as overtime started.
Just talk through it.
Plus the extra stress of having to watch 55 minutes of basketball officiated by Bo Borowski and Larry Serrato. I mean, that should count for something.
Hey! Do not short sell Gene Steratore. He was horrendous as well tonight.
Also true. The other two are.
Can we all agree that Pat Chambers needs to switch to decaf? Seriously, that guy.
He apparently was still complaining about the saying that basket was no good after the game. I'm trying to catching a couple tweets. I mean, I thought the angle they finally showed from the 360 camera was the most conclusive one that there was, and it seemed like actually based on that one he did get it off. But
yeah, I mean, look, it was close, but on the floor it was called good, and there was nothing in those replays that could overturn it. There absolutely wasn't. I don't know if it was off, but I mean, once you call it good on the floor and then you see how close it was, there's absolutely no way you could overturn that. But I will say that Chambers is getting the reputation of like Diet Fran McCaffrey. It's getting bad, guys.
Diet Fran McCaffrey.
Poor man's Fran McCaffrey.
Wouldn't it be like half calf Fran McCaffrey, half Caffrey?
No.
Just hey, it's late.
I couldn't believe he's like getting in the guy's face. That would have been great if he had ended up getting a technical. I don't know how that really works. If you get a technical like after an overtime period, like could they shoot free throws and win the game at that point? I mean, because as you said, he and Steratore were like
they were nose to nose. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything your worst nightmares could be is those two nose to nose. I mean, that could have gone any number of directions. None of them good.
That is very true. So we're going to go to last call here in just a second. We're actually going to do 3 segments of last call in honor of this absurd game. But Andy, I have a quick question for you. You had David Warlock of the NCAA on bracketology.fm recently. Did he hint at perhaps triple overtime wins counting more for the selection committee? Maybe.
So did not
get a little boost from this.
It did not come up. I did not come up. So we can't say for sure. I mean, it is an extra game. I mean, it's almost a whole nother half of a game. So it feels like it should count extra, but maybe the fact that it was against Penn State probably washes that away and shakes it out to just be one.
So, okay, but for real, talk Indiana fans off the ledge for a moment. I mean, look, we know that we're close to the ledge, but talk Indiana fans off the ledge. I mean, if the tournament were selected today, Indiana would be in. Don't you think?
Yes. I as part of what I wrote up for Zach Osterman had asked me a couple questions for the Star, since this feels like 2 years ago when this is going to be like a weekly segment of are they in or are they out, and what do things look like? I mean, the reality is that right now they would be in. I think at the time I looked at it for him, there's only 7 teams in the country who have 2 top 10 wins, one of those being IU. So at this point, you're not so bad that things are completely unraveled, because the NCAA went away from the most recent 10, most recent 12 games, counting kind of extra or giving additional weight in there, and so that's obviously not the case now. So while IU has played poorly, they're still in good shape now. I mean, my answer to him was, in general, if they can finish at 500 in the league, I think they're okay. That obviously after the last couple of weeks feels like a pretty big challenge, but part of that just goes to recent history of teams with 14 losses, not getting in the tournament and to kind of avoid that point, IU would need to go 500 in the league. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it at this point. So I think that's kind of what it is. Obviously, the Blackman situation makes it a lot harder to evaluate because until he's back, you don't really know that, what this team's roster is going to look like as they go there. The Anunoby one obviously is easier. You can start to try to evaluate this team, what they look like without him. The problem is there haven't been too many games when they haven't had him, but they have had Blackman. So I don't know if that's working in their favor at this point or not, just the kind of misdirection element of having no idea who's actually healthy game to game. But assuming Blackman comes back, I think they have a better chance to go 500 in the league. And I think if they can do that, then they'll be okay.
All righty. Well, we will let's move forward here to last call. We'll obviously talk about Indiana's upcoming game against Wisconsin too, and then deliver our final thoughts on this crazy night of Indiana basketball. That is our last call, which is brought to you by our friends at Yogi's Bar and Grill in Bloomington. As we've been telling you about, Yogi's is offering a food discount to Assembly Call listeners during IU games. And you had some extra time to get some food if you were there for tonight's game. And that works for both home games and road games. Just head to Yogi's during any game. Tell them the guys from the Assembly Call sent you, and you will get 10% off your food. And it has to be during a game, but again, any game will work. And then stick around after, have a drink, and catch the Assembly Call live right there at the bar because we're playing right there at Yogi's. Again, that's 10% off your food at Yogi's during IU games. Just tell them the Assembly Call sent you. All righty. Well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We are wrapping up here talking about Indiana's 110-102 victory over Penn State tonight to keep the season alive. I mean, those were the stakes tonight. It was lose and fall completely off the brink or win and still be right there, kind of one stiff breeze away from falling over. But at least the Hoosiers were there, and they give themselves a chance as we move forward. Now, probably the most difficult game left on the schedule is Sunday. It's at Wisconsin. That has obviously been a house of horrors for the Hoosiers, Ryan, as you know well. So, Andy, why don't you give us just, the very quick look at Wisconsin. And then, Ryan, I want you to tell us, so I'm going to give you a chance to kind of think about this and prepare your answer. What will an Indiana victory at Wisconsin look like? Like, if that were to happen, what would it look like? I want you to paint that picture for us after Andy tells us about the Badgers.
Well, Wisconsin, since losing to North Carolina in Maui, they've won 15 of their last 16 games, including 6 in a row. So they're obviously coming in with a lot of confidence. They did look terrible playing against Rutgers last weekend, which seems kind of inexplicable, but they bounced back and beat Illinois pretty handily on the road this week. I mean, kind of know the cast of characters there between Ethan Happ and Bronson Koenig, Nigel Hayes. I mean, those are really the three guys to watch out for from them offensively. And, they're definitely a team that has over time really forced IU to play that that Wisconsin wants them to play and not the other way around. So I think that's going to continue to be a challenge. And we all know that no matter how bad we thought the officiating was in tonight's game, the chances of IU getting calls at the Kohl Center is less than 0. So I think, the 7th level of hell somewhere is probably a game at the Kohl Center officiated by some combination of the clowns that were doing the game tonight. Maybe throw Pat Driscoll in there just for fun, and maybe they just add a game with like 2 additional referees to call fouls on IU and turn the other way when Wisconsin does anything. So just throw these guys in plus Pat Driscoll and Ted Valentine, and that might be everyone's worst nightmare. So if that comes to fruition, just start your Super Bowl party early, everybody, and just move on. But it's going to be, a huge challenge for IU. Wisconsin's, I think, established themselves as the best team in the league, which, they were among those contenders early on. Play well at home. The flip side of that is IU's kind of playing with house money at that point. There's nothing to lose to go in there and, play kind of free and don't think about things too much and see what happens. So we'll see, but definitely a tall order to say the least.
But don't start your Super Bowl party early because Ryan's best rants always come after the IU Wisconsin game in Madison. So you are definitely going to want to be around for that. Okay, so Ryan, paint us the picture of how an Indiana victory will look if it is.
Yeah, just to give another note there. I think that 1 year after a game there, I said that if in medieval times, if you were as bad as those officiating as those officials were, you'd be hanged and left outside the walls of the city as an example to others.
We should go back and just compile all of your rants after.
I think some people thought that I was
that checks out. That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think somebody thought I was like encouraging those people should be killed. I was saying, no. I'm just saying that's what would have happened had we been in more normal, reasonable times in the Middle Ages. What would an IU win look like? Oh God. Oh boy. Oh man, I don't know. Ethan Happ.
Yeah, it has to be some combination of Wisconsin foul trouble and Indiana shooting the lights out, right?
Yeah, you'd have to shoot like 60% from three, I think, 50 to 60% from three. You're going to have to out-rebound them. You're going to have to not get into foul trouble, which I just don't see happening. And Thomas Bryant's going to have to dominate and have a double-double. And not only is he going to have to dominate, you're also going to have to get help from Deron Davis. So you're going to have to shoot well. You're going to have to play smart, not turn the ball over. You got to be under 15 turnovers, I think, maybe 14. Out-rebound them.
Get Nigel Hayes to think NBA scouts really want to see him shoot 3-pointers again.
Yeah,
he went through that phase for a little while. That would be helpful.
Yeah. And not leave guys like Koenig and Vito Brown open off of reversals. I mean that's you got to at least make them shoot with a hand in their face. They're going to get shots.
I mean don't fall down 13-0 right at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, that would help. I mean that would help. But no, they've got to be in it at halftime. They've got to come out with some intensity like they did. I mean, look, against Northwestern, they started off 10-1, and then they just it was like the air coming out of a balloon. But that start was encouraging because they knew, okay, this is a chance and this is a big game. And hey, if IU beats Wisconsin, that's a huge turnaround for the season right there. I would not bet on IU beating Wisconsin, but it's certainly, they're not a flawless team, and they've certainly had some screw ups along the way and not played great in all their games. So IU's gonna have to play a great game though to win it at the Kohl Center. I mean, and that's every year, even when IU's great, and has a great team, they're gonna have to play great to win at the Kohl Center. Everybody has to play great to win at the Kohl Center.
And you will recall that the first Wisconsin game, Deron Davis did have a very nice game off the bench, had 12 points. And in that game, Indiana did keep it to under 14 turnovers. They had 13, and they did out-rebound Wisconsin. The other guy who played well in that first matchup was Juwan Morgan. He had 12 points. He had 7 boards. And so, to me, for Indiana to be able to compete, they're going to need Juwan Morgan to be more like Juwan Morgan. A guy who can maybe go defend Nigel Hayes and really make things tough on him, because OG Anunoby was the guy who did that in the first game. And I think you need James Blackman Jr. back, because I certainly don't think that you can expect Josh Newkirk to go on the road and do his JBJ impression like he did tonight against Penn State. You're going to need James back. It sounds like there's a chance he plays. And then if he shoots well, if you can rebound, if you feed Thomas Bryant, and Wisconsin has an off day, then that can happen. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it certainly seems unlikely given what we've seen from Indiana over the last 135 minutes of basketball. Fortunately, the last 55 minutes of basketball ended up with a win, and we can all exhale for a night and enjoy this one. And then let's see what happens on Sunday. Because the nice thing is, for the first time in a while, and again, this is not a position that you want to be in. Indiana should never be in this position. Every game for Indiana, you should feel like, maybe you're not favored, but you're right there even. This is kind of the first game all year where you look at it and it's like, all right, there are really no expectations. Indiana can just go play. It's felt like every other game this year, there have been such heavy expectations on the Hoosiers. And so I just wonder how they will look, how they will play without any of that. No one thinks that they can win. They're going on the road, and we'll see what they can do. Who knows? It would obviously be a huge turning point for the season if they could get it. And I think even just battling Wisconsin for 40 minutes, playing a solid 40-minute game, even if you go up there and lose, if you can walk away proud of the effort and how you played, and maybe you kept the turnovers down and you had some things that you can build on, then maybe that's something that can help propel you for the rest of the season. And again, that's not a position Indiana basketball should be in, but in a one-game scenario, that's where we are. That's the reality of this season, and so we'll wait to see what happens on Sunday. All right, gentlemen, let's end this crazy night of basketball. Let's get to our last call, brought to us by Yogi's. Ryan, you can lead it off.
Oh, I get to go first this time, huh? Look, just be proud that they won tonight. I know it was not pretty. And was not necessarily the greatest win on the planet, but those guys battled. Give them credit. They're down what we thought would be 3 starters at the beginning of the year, and so they're sitting here giving you their all And those kids played hard for a long period of time. You're looking at guys doubling their minute output, and really just were exhausted at the end of that game. You could tell the ice baths will be full in Cook Hall tonight. Those guys have just got to be absolutely exhausted. I hope they get a day off tomorrow, especially with the extra day to prepare for Wisconsin, it being a Sunday game instead of a Saturday game. And you know what? Bask in the glory that Purdue fans had to miss the entire first half of their game watching the end of the Indiana game, because, it's just always fun to troll Purdue that way. So good job, boys, for playing late and screwing over the Purdue fans out there. Nice work.
Mr. Bottoms, last call.
It obviously would be easy, and certainly some people on Twitter were taking this road of getting mad about how this game played out and whatever, but I'm never gonna I'm gonna use double negative. I'm never gonna not be happy to see a team win a game like they won tonight. And I think if I ever got to that point, I'd probably stop doing the show and I might stop watching the team altogether. And I think to look at what these guys kind of had stacked against them, yeah, you're not playing a great team by any means, but you're playing without key guys, making guys take on roles that they haven't really been forced to in the past. And Newkirk having to take on a little bit bigger role, Robert Johnson being the kind of go-to perimeter scorer. And I think you just got to give them credit. They played their hearts out in a game that they absolutely had to win. And I think, to your point, maybe they can exhale a little bit and move forward. And I think, if there's nothing else to take away from these couple games, like, this is the Thomas Bryant that we all wanted to see these last couple games. And maybe it's the fact that it now has become clear that he's the focal point of the offense, and any uncertainty around that is now gone with Blackman out. And even if Blackman comes back on Sunday, they need to not forget how good Thomas Bryant has played, and not forget how to get him the ball in the post, because I think he's been fantastic. And if there's anything that I take away from these last couple games, it's just how impressed I've been with him. It seemed like after the game, Crean talked about he had really tried to step up from never seen him more purposeful, I think is what he said, but really just kind of speaking to the leadership he's shown as guys have gone down, and he's really stepped up and maybe started to play a little bit of that leadership role that this team sorely needed and still does need. But certainly some good things to take away from what was at times an ugly game. And as Ryan said, hopefully these guys can get some rest. I know Bryant said after the game he'd never been more tired after a game before. And after playing the minutes that he did with the amount of contact that went on in this game, I have no doubt that that's the case. And so congrats to them on a big win in a must-win game. And as we said before, take it one game at a time. I got one more game coming up on Sunday, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, Thomas Bryant just played his butt off tonight, and it's been so great seeing him get back to being the guy that we saw last year. Seeing him be so much more effective, getting the ball up on the rim, getting it up on there with a chance for it to go in. And he's making a lot of those twos again, and it's great to see. So I echo what Andy says. Again, if you enter a game and you're not going to be happy if the team wins, then you probably just shouldn't be watching the game. And I get the frustration. I feel the frustration about how the team played, because they didn't look good. And for most of the game, this looked like two pretty subpar teams playing. But at the end of the day, Indiana found a way to win. And that is big. And that's the biggest takeaway from tonight. And look, the reality is Indiana is a crazy James Blackman three-pointer, and all the craziness we saw tonight away from losing twice to Penn State and being 3-7 in the conference and really being in a bad spot. But as it was, Indiana was able to pull these wins out, and you just hope that maybe something that happened tonight, whether it's playing this long and that brings guys together, or the confidence that Josh Newkirk gets, or confidence that a guy like Devontae Green gets, Indiana can start to build something, and the last time that we thought this or tried to talk ourselves into this, it was after the Michigan State game, and Indiana had won 4 out of 5, and we know what happened. They went on the road and just completely laid eggs. And so I think the big hope for Sunday is that Indiana takes the positives from tonight, because there were a lot of negatives, but there were a lot of positives too, that Indiana takes the positives from tonight and carries that forward on the road with them to Wisconsin. And whether that results in a victory or a hard-fought loss, that something positive up there happens that Indiana can carry forward. Because, again, as bad as things feel right now, and overall, when you take a step back, they do, sitting at 15-8 and 5-5 in the conference, given where this thing was at one time, a lot of things are still out there in front of Indiana. If they can string together some wins, this can still be an NCAA tournament team. And look, with the talent that this team has and the way that they can sometimes shoot, you never know, depending on the matchups, when you can go on a run. So Indiana just needs to give itself that chance. And by winning tonight, it did that. It kept that chance. It stayed alive, lived to fight another day. Onward we go. The next game for the Hoosiers is Sunday against Wisconsin in the Kohl Center. That game, I believe, is a noon Eastern tip or a 1 Eastern tip, one of those two. It's on CBS. Either way, it's early. The postgame show will be right after that. It won't interfere with any of your Super Bowl plans. So join
until
us
it goes to quadruple overtime, everybody, and then we'll be right back here 4 hours after the game started.
I feel like we'd be much, much happier after a quadruple overtime game in the Kohl Center than at home against Penn State. So if that happens, I would welcome that.
IU would finish that game with three players on the floor. It'd be like Quentin Taylor, Tim Priller, and Grant Galen finishing the game out after everyone else had fouled out.
Yeah, but if you tell us that we're in the fourth overtime, that means we've played them to a draw for 55 minutes. I would take my chances.
Actually, I feel like McRoberts would have to be out there from strictly a Hoosiers perspective. You'd get the like, coach, my team is on the floor.
My team's on the floor.
Yeah, I think that feels right.
Yes, that does feel right. All right, and on that note, we sign off for the evening. Thanks for being here. We will talk to you Sunday after IU Wisconsin. Go Hoosiers.